All right, and we have a very special guest on the show today. It is always a pleasure and an honor when he graced this show with his presence. The mayor of our home city, our great city of Cleveland, Mayor Frank Jackson. Welcome to the show. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, we'll start like this. Obviously, the one of the topics that's on everybody's mind right now is COVID. Can you give us just a quick update of where the city is? You know,
hmm
how are we doing right now with COVID, and what do you think is coming in the horizon?
Well, I will tell you that we're not doing well in terms of infections, and even the number of deaths are starting to occur on a daily basis for the last 2 to 3 days. When this first started in March of this year, and then we had reached what was the average over a 7-day period, around 60, 70, 75 cases per day, and that was high. Then we were able, sometime I think in July, to start going down, and we were at the point where we're in the low teens per day, sometimes single digits per day. And just maybe 5 weeks ago, it started to go up to the 20s, the 40s, the 50s. And now we have sometimes over 300 new cases a day. And so averaging that out over a 7-day period, last 7 days, I would say 200 or over 200 would be the average. So that means that things aren't going well in terms of new infections. And I would say in the last couple of days, there has been probably 5 or 6 deaths associated with the coronavirus. And before that, we had gone weeks before. When I say weeks, I mean that amounted to several months before we had an additional death. I think we're at 165 deaths now, and probably over 12,000 to 13,000 infections. Again, averaging over 200 a day and as high as 300 and something. So we're not doing well in that regard. Now, what is happening is we've instituted some additional measures, advisory that people to stay at home. We constantly promote the basic rules of stay at home. If you have to go out, keep social distance, wear a mask, and constantly wash your hands. But again, that is something that is a preventive thing. And right now it seems to have gotten to be a community spread where it's very difficult to go out anywhere and not come in contact with someone. So it's even more important that we follow the basic rules. The good thing that is on the horizon is that there appears to be 2 or 3 companies that have come up with what they believe to be a vaccine that appears to be successful. Now, they have not been approved by the Federal Drug Administration and the Center for Disease Control, but they are fully expecting that to happen sometime next week or the week after that. And when that happens, there's already some talk about the availability of these vaccines. Now, anybody who takes the vaccine has to take 2 doses. And depending on which vaccine they take from which company, it could be a dose today, and then 3 weeks from now, and another one might be a dose today 4 or 5 weeks from now. And so each has to be 2 doses. So what they're doing is at the state levels, at the CDC level, Center for Disease Control level, they're setting priorities in terms of who should get these initial vaccines. And they're passing it down to the state, and the state is developing a process for that. Right now, they're saying that first responders in terms of health care, the people who work in hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, the people who come in contact, nurses, assistants who come in contact with the COVID patients that are in the hospital. They're also looking at those who are in conjugate living, like nursing homes, and the people who work in those nursing homes. And so with the vaccines coming, they will send those directly to the hospitals for them to set up a process and a systematic approach with their people. They will Walgreens and I think CVS drugstore. They will be the ones who will be distributing to the nursing homes. If the nursing homes don't take it themselves, then they will distribute to the nursing homes, and those nursing homes would give the vaccines to their employees and their residents at the nursing home. And then they're talking about the third part is to give it to the local health departments. And in Cuyahoga County has one, Cleveland has one. And then what would happen is they're looking at that being targeted to emergency medical workers, like EMS, emergency medical service workers, EMS. And so what we're doing is, locally with Cleveland, we're just going to set up infrastructure to operationalize that, so that we can have a protocol as to how this thing is distributed from the state and targeted to these people, these categories of people, and then get it out. And as they go along during the month of December, there will be additional quantities of the vaccine coming. And then as those categories are taken care of, they will go to another category. So by the time it reaches the masses of people, the everyday person, you're probably looking at maybe 2 to 3 months for that to occur. So that's COVID, the virus in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. We're talking with Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson. And while we're on the topic of COVID, another concern that a lot of people have, which is kind of obviously connected to this, is COVID's impact on the economy. And we look at what's going on, not only just in Cleveland, but in a lot of major cities across the country. A lot of local businesses, small businesses, restaurants, and things like that are being hammered as a result. What does the recovery look like? What are things that the city is doing or plan to do to help businesses that have been bruised and battered, throughout this whole coronavirus situation?
Well, if you remember, one of the early times that I came on your show to talk about this, I had mentioned that the shutdown was an attempt to stop people from coming in contact with each other, either socially or through businesses, right? And that the governor was beginning to gradually open the economy. Remember back then, I said that if it's not done right, then what you'll have is that you will have an additional spike that will occur that will be far more severe than the first spike, which means more people will get infected, and it will threaten us with a possible additional shutdown where small businesses will be out of business. And that is basically where we are. And many of these small businesses that are operating now, they're operating under restrictions. We have put restrictions on them at the state and local level in terms of the capacity, in terms of the number of customers they can have. If they do have customers, they have to wear masks, that they have to, some places have to close at certain times. So there's some significant restrictions on these businesses, and which means the amount of revenues coming into those businesses is restricted. Now, it doesn't mean that the cost is restricted, because if you open, you still got to pay your lease, you still got to pay your heat, you still got to pay your light bill, all property, all those kinds of expenses are fixed. So that doesn't get reduced. But your revenues coming in does. And so many of these businesses are staying open just to stay open and just looking to break even. so that they're not losing money. And some of them are losing money, but they're carrying themselves anyway. So with those businesses, if there's another shutdown or a more severe restriction, they will not be able to reopen again. They will be gone. And so with that in mind, what we've done is the federal stimulus dollars came down and was supposed to be helping small business. There was a lot of hoops for them to jump, and many of them took advantage of it, but many did not. So on a local level, we developed our own program in putting money in to help small business to carry themselves for a period of time, with helping them to pay their lease, pay their light bill, their gas bill, those kind of things. We developed other programs where if a business would come back, would reopen, and they would restore employment to a certain level, they could get a little bit more money. We knew that businesses, when they opened, in order for them to function under the restrictions, and they had to put up plexiglass maybe, or do other kinds of things, put a ventilation system in, all those kind of things. So we allow for monies to do those kind of protection, personal protection kind of things. So we did all that, and those who were able to access that and move forward, we believe it has helped them, but still they're still struggling because they cannot get to the kind of capacity they need to make the kind of profits that they have made in the past. So breaking even is what they're attempting to do, and we're helping them. Now we put together another pots of money that deals with individuals, with rent of people who lost their job, and as a result of losing their job, they can't pay their rent. They can't pay their utility bills. There are other. They may be in need of food. All those kinds. So we put an additional amount of money into that area in order to help people. But again, all that money is running out as more and more people need stuff. Then the money kind of diminishes going forward. Now, in our budget into next year, we're putting our budget together for 2021. We're going to attempt to put an additional dollars into helping small businesses and helping people, and to have a better marketing of those programs so that we can have a better distribution, a more equitable distribution of who does access it.
Absolutely. We're talking with Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson, and obviously this is this whole time with dealing with COVID has been something that has really hit not only our city but our county and our state as well. What has been the relationship with the county and the state with the city? Has it been a good collaborative effort? Have they communicated well with the people running your departments in the city and stuff like that?
Well, yes. The governor has. I have a call. I'll be on a call with the governor at least twice a week. Myself and I think 5 other big city mayors. We have a call with the governor every a couple of times a week, usually on 2 now Mondays and Thursdays, and it's usually done just before he has his press conference, so he can let us know what he's doing. We then bring him our concerns, and he gives us a picture of where it is statewide, and give us an indication of where he's going to go. And the county health department is a very good department in terms of its experience and ability to do the necessary things that a health department should do. So the state health department, the county health department, and the city health department work in a very collaborative way in terms of the exchange of information and support each other. Now, every city does not have a health department. There are not that many health departments in the state of Ohio, but we're one of the few, if maybe might be the only, but we're one of the few at least cities where we have a county and a city health department. And when this vaccine is distributed, some of that will go to these health departments who will be responsible for getting the vaccines to the categories that are identified by the state health department. And then as those categories are taken care of, then they'll move into additional categories. And eventually it will reach just the general population for distribution and ability and receiving the vaccine.
Okay. So last question on this topic, and then we're going to move on. Dante, I know you have a question kind of dovetailing with the last answer that the mayor just gave as well.
Absolutely. So Mr. Mayor, being the mayor of the largest city in Cuyahoga County and the second largest city in the state, how do you balance that collaboration while also making sure that your city, our city, gets the resources that we desperately need as well?
Well, that is the juggling. That is the juggling. You have to work with people in order to get something done, and when you do that, sometimes you'll figure out that you have a lot of things in common, and it is in your mutual interest to work together on some things. And there are times when you'll find that your interests are diverse from each other, and in that case, you go back to representing what you're supposed to represent. But because you have a relationship, it means that you don't burn the bridge for the future. And so everyone knows, every mayor will represent their city, and they will represent their city the best they can, and they won't sacrifice their city for someone else's interest. But what we will do is we'll work collaboratively, and we'll work together, and where we have this common ground, which helps us in terms of our power to influence state decisions and policies and things like that. But there are diverging interests that we have also, and with that, we'll gravitate back to our city self-interest. But because we have relationships, and we build those relationships, that we're not burning the bridge. And other mayors understand that. They know that there are times when that I got to do what I got to do, and there are times that they got to do what they have to do, and we'll be in disagreement. But we understand that because it is the rules of the game that we're in, and so what we make sure we don't do is burn a bridge. Now, this is even across party lines. You get caught up in this stuff where you have this strict party line stuff. What's in the interest of Democrats? What's in the interest of Republicans? What's in the interest of rural areas versus what's in the interest of urban centers? What's in the interest of the well-to-do, and what's in the interest of the poor? What you'll find many times, there's an alignment with these apparent opposition groups, and finding that alignment many times, as I said, allows us to move ahead where we would not have moved ahead before, and allows us to develop a relationship where we can cross over sometime. When the party says no, we can say yes, or when the ideology says no, we can say yes.
Absolutely. And that actually just brings up a thought in my mind, because it would be, the country would look a lot different if there were more people who thought like that. And I've always known you to be a pretty pragmatic person. Has that always been your governing philosophy? Is it something that you developed over time? Where did you develop that pragmatism?
I have a purpose. I'm not here because I wanted to be mayor. As a matter of fact, being mayor wasn't even part of my ambition or even thought. Even the point of being council president or even a councilman was not an ambition of mine. I wound up in these positions. So I wound up in these positions, and I took on the challenge of winning the position through an election, and the challenge of serving in that position because I'm here for a purpose. And so to me, I don't care nothing about a Democrat or Republican. I don't care nothing about a liberal or conservative. I don't care nothing about the affluent or the poor in the sense that people draw a line, right? My purpose is to serve the people I represent. And when I was a councilman, I represented Ward 5, which is, 99.9% black.
Mm-hmm.
When I became a council president, I represented the protection of council and the members of council and helped them do what they needed to do in their wards. And when I became mayor, I represent all people. And it doesn't matter if you voted for me or you didn't vote for me, if you like me or don't like me. If your issue is legitimate, then it's my duty and responsibility to address that issue that you bring. And so, but at the end of it all, I still stay on 38th and Central. I ain't gone nowhere. I still go home every night, which means I go home to my family in an African-American community that is a poor community, impoverished community, with all of the ills of crime and traumatization of children and injustice and racism and inequities and disparities. So when I'm there, I'm not far from that. So I always put that in what I do. So I'm glad to help the more influent and the corporate people and the business people, as long as a condition for that is that it serves the interest of those who do not have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to deal with a Republican agenda as long as it deals with the progressive side of what we have to do in order to help people. So to me, I try to fair. People ask me, and I'll let this be, but people ask me, what is the difficulty of being mayor? Is it hard? What's the difficulty? And I say to them that the decisions are not easy. The challenges are difficult, but that's the job. That's what you do. If you can't, old folks say, if you can't take the heat, get out the kitchen.
Right.
But the real issue about holding positions of authority and power and influence is you have to manage bullshit all the time.
Right.
And that becomes the most challenging part because it's unproductive. It is the most time-consuming, resource-consuming, most unproductive situation. And you have if you get rid of half of it, you can actually find something to do. So there are people who thrive in that environment because they love chaos and confusion because they can manipulate the situation for an outcome that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And they can put deceit and lies in there and conspiracies in there, and people will follow that because they're confused. Mm-hmm. Even the people who you intend to help. Mm-hmm. So my pragmatism, as you call it, is really founded and based in staying on my game, staying focused on what I'm trying to accomplish, and the utilizing of the system to benefit the people rather than bending the people to benefit the system. And it's not set up the way I want it to be set up. So I'm constantly dealing with this thing. I call it the beast. So I'm constantly, I'm constantly dealing with it all the time.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit. Actually, this next question is kind of dovetail a little bit on that topic. Robin, I know you had a question for the mayor as well, so we'll go ahead and go to that.
Yeah, so being that 2020 has been a rough year in a lot of ways, and one of those things that we've seen is an increase of violence in some city neighborhoods. What do you think is the cause of it, and what is being done to address it?
Now, it's very interesting that you asked that question because it is the right question. If it were not for COVID-19, then that would be on the forefront of everybody's mind. But it's not on everybody's mind because the COVID-19 is the immediacy, which is the urgency of the day. So what you're asking me is really on the back burner, but for us, it should be on the front burner, along with COVID-19, because we cannot. It's not an either or proposition. But let me go straight to your question. I mentioned we have about 165 deaths from COVID this year. We probably had that amount, if not more, in homicides. And I would tell you that the majority of those homicides were through guns. And so that is probably about around 40 or more homicides already this year than we had all of last year. So for whatever reason, 2020, it just burst. Now, what are some of those reasons that I believe it is? One of the reasons I think is because we live in an environment with the leadership out of Washington who thrives on chaos and confusion and actually promotes violence to some degree, to a lot really, that we have an atmosphere out here where you have people just walking around with automatic weapons. They call it open carry, whether you're carrying a pistol or a rifle. People go to protest with it. There's a talk about harming people, and it's not condemned. It's really promoted in a sense. So we have an environment, an atmosphere where it's almost legitimizing this as a way of resolving an issue, right? That's a general environment atmosphere thing. Then couple that with the easy availability of guns. And now I don't have a problem with people owning guns. I really don't. As a matter of fact, if someone doesn't have one, I think they should get one. I don't have a problem with people owning guns. The issue is responsible gun ownership. And the state of Ohio, because it's following this National Rifle Association, this very conservative approach to life, has pretty much stripped all local communities of any ability to regulate the ownership of guns and how people obtain these guns. And so you have, in a sense, a trafficking of guns like you have trafficking of drugs. But in the gun thing, it's just like a pharmaceutical company that saturates a community with opiates, pain pills, and is done legally. It's the same thing with guns. And there are ways in which people can buy large amounts of guns and it be legal, and they can go and take those guns and sell them out on the street. And they can do that because they say they're personal and they're not a licensed gun dealer and all this stuff. And in that case, you don't have a background check. You don't know if the person's crazy. You don't know if the person is a convicted felon. And certainly, they don't. If it's about making money, they don't care if they sell it to a kid, which they do. Which leads to the third thing: not only the availability of it, but the fact that if I told a teenager that I needed a gun, and I gave them $400, I would in a day they'd come back with a Glock, 9mm Glock or 40 caliber, and they just give it to me. That's how easy it is for them to get it, and they know how to get these things. So you have the guns in the hands of immature people children who are making immature decisions, who are caught up in this penitentiary mentality of, if you do something that disrespects or transgress me, I have to react in a way that is overwhelming to what you did to me. That's like living in penitentiary, and it's out on the street. That, along with those who are involved in crime, who are not supposed to have a gun legally, but they can pick it up through this method that I mentioned, and they can pick it up, and they're shooters. They shoot people. That's what they do. You know, they shoot people for money. They shoot people because of a year or two remembering of what somebody did down the line to their friend or family member. They now go. You got a parent. Somebody did something to somebody, and then they just ride past their family's house and shoot the house up.
Right.
You see, all this stuff is going on. It's just pure violence to the point that the community is mourning. I had a meeting with the brass, the top people, the chief and the deputy chiefs and the commanders in charge of homicide and gangs and gang unit and narcotics and the various deputy chiefs and the chief. And I told them, I said, the community is mourning. It is hard right now, even with me, to a week go by and not to know somebody who has not died, or have one of my kids know somebody and remind me of who they are. I mean, almost on a weekly basis. So how do you do that as a community? And you're in mourning. We're in mourning, constant mourning about this stuff. And then we have our children who live in this environment, who either are perpetuating that, the victim of it, or witnessing it. They are post-traumatic stress. And as a result of that, they make decisions. Now, adults who are traumatized make irrational decisions. Well, imagine what a child traumatized, and the way in which the juvenile mind is and the child's mind is, and they're traumatized. What kind of emotional intelligence do you think they're going to have in regards to a situation when they have to face it?
Right.
Now, I know that's a long about answer, but that is to me the context of what is going on. And so the question becomes is what we're doing is how do we get in there besides just lock them up and throw away the key? Because some people just need to go to penitentiary, by the way. They ain't ready to be rehab. They just need to go.
Right.
They just dangerous. They need to be taken off the street. So what we're doing, we're investing money into the traumatization of kids to address those children who have been traumatized. Where we're putting people in the rec center who are professionally trained to identify trauma and to help connect them and their families with agencies that can help them, and depending on what the needs are. At the same time, in the health department, we have declared violence as a public health issue. Recently, the city council passed legislation that declares racism as a public health issue. We had legislation passed a couple of weeks ago that allows me now to set up a complete division of public health and social justice, where dealing with these underlying things around violence and disparities and inequities and racism are things that this division will attempt to address, and it will be housed in the health department. So those are the kind of things we're doing, as well as beefing up the police and making sure that, like this class we have on now is about 50% minority. The class we graduated not too long ago, few weeks back, is probably about 40% minority. So we have a recruitment effort to get people into the police department And you know that's hard for a black man. He says, I don't want to be the police. A black woman will tend to pick up the challenge. Black men, I just don't want to be it. And then what we've done is we haven't relaxed the qualification, but we are interviewing in a more sensitive way where this thing over here, this minor little thing over here, would have disqualified you before. Now it doesn't disqualify you, particularly if it's an isolated incident. And so we're bringing on people who look like the community in which they're supposed to serve. They're young, and we're also looking at whether they're minority or majority, male or female. Do they understand an urban environment? Do they understand how it walks, how it talks, how it listens? Do they understand the culture in which they'll be plucked into? Because if they don't, then it ain't going right? And so we're looking at those who understand an urban environment and the culture of an inner city environment. Those are the kinds of things that we're attempting to do. Long range, short range.
Right.
But
right.
it takes
Absolutely.
work and consistent staying on your game. And that goes back to that pragmatic question.
Right.
You see, I had to stay on that game, right? I had to stay focused on that game. And I can't get caught up in the ideology or the dogma of whatever the drama and the BS of the moment is.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And real quick, I know we're not going to keep you for too much longer, but there's just so much good stuff and so many questions to ask. But just on that topic, particularly going back to the issue with guns, we see that that's an issue that's so polarizing, and what you laid out is exactly the situation, exactly what's happening. And we also know that statistically most gun crimes are committed by people who were not supposed to have the gun to begin with. So how do we address it, not only from a policy perspective, but also from I don't know if a public relations perspective is the best way to put it, that addressing that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want law-abiding citizens to own guns? Because it seems like when we get in the conversation about guns, it's almost like an all or nothing approach, and both sides just kind of get to their fences and just start going back and forth with one another. But there is a middle ground. We know that most gun crimes are committed by people who shouldn't have had them in the first place. So how do we make that point clear from a policy perspective that we want to address that and not try to harm the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens to own guns?
Well, remember what I said about chaos and confusion,
right?
And how people then in that chaos and confusion, people are forced into camps, into ideology, into points of view, all this other, and they just stay there. And it doesn't make any difference if what their point of view appears not to be making any sense at all. It doesn't matter, because it defines their reality for them. And so they're not listening. The thing about this, let me give you a perfect example, and then I'll get back to the resolution. Give you a perfect example. There is no difference between a left-wing progressive ideology and a right-wing non-progressive and in some ways racist ideology. There's no difference. The only difference there is that their approach to life. Their approach to life. Because this one believes you should do it this way, this one believes you should do it that way. Where there's absolutely no difference, between them, is that they're both intolerant. They're intolerant of anybody who thinks anything different than they think. And they both will do you. Both. It doesn't matter. Whether they're on the far left or far right. So keep that in mind. Right. And what happens is, we as black people are always given a choice of ideology that is not ours. So if it's not ours, it either against us and really transparently or honestly saying that they don't like us and that they believe we should be subject to them, all that kind of stuff, to the other end who just believes that they have the knowledge to tell us what we should be doing and how we should behave and what we should believe. So either way, it's not us.
Right.
It's their schizophrenic attitude. And what we wind up doing, we wind up aligning ourselves with these things when it is not our interest. So let's go back to the pragmatic side.
Mm-hmm.
We as a people have to identify what in that is to our benefit and what is not to our benefit, and put our energy and resources and effort into talking to our people and educating our people about the benefit to them and why these other things are not to their benefit. It doesn't mean that we create an enemy with them. What we're saying in effect is we have needs. We have, our people are bearing the burden of institutionalized inequity, disparity, and racism, which means we have unique needs that these philosophies and ideologies will not resolve. Because at the end of the day, whether they're far left or far right, under this institutionalized inequity, disparities, and racism, we will always be in the same position. Mm-hmm. Always. So we're going to have to come up out of that on our own and begin to develop a philosophy as to what it is that is in our best interest and promote that. And our problem is that we have many people, whether they be elected people or non-elected people, who are either who do not understand really what's going on, and they wind up in one of these camps, or they do understand what's going on, and they attempt to manipulate it for their own self-interest. Mm-hmm. And that's just being honest with you. And so what's happening is the average citizen just left out there to fend for themselves, and they're being fed a lot of misinformation. And it's all up in this chaos, this confusion, because remember, ignorance is a fertile ground for manipulation. And ignorance doesn't mean stupid, it means you lack knowledge of something.
Right.
And if you lack that knowledge and you're searching for an answer, somebody will always tell you, I got it for you. Mm-hmm. And in most of those cases, when they say that, that knowledge that they give you is based on positioning them in a better position for themselves, not for you.
Absolutely.
I hope that explains it.
Yes, sir.
So to me, it's a matter of us identifying. We had to do that as an individual because we don't have an infrastructure for that. You know, the church used to do that. We did have, I remember when I was young, that we had the 21st District Caucus with Congressman Stokes, and it was separate from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And so it talked about issues that were relevant to the Black community. And so now all of that stuff that used to exist, that in some way that the masses of people could rely on to help give direction and to help them figure out all this stuff and help them walk through this maze, all those things are gone now. Mm-hmm. Now, the good part about all this is that we are like a blank sheet. We're like a blank tablet, a blank canvas, which means we can become whatever it is we want to be. And our experience of bearing the burden of inequity, disparity, and racism has given us a strength and a tenacity that no other group of people has in America. And if that is channeled in a way, even the anger, even the bitterness, even the hatred, even all of that stuff that creates that energy and that force, if that's channeled in a way that is not self-destructive or destructive to community, but channeled in a way that makes us competitive, that makes us compete, that allows us to identify where we should be pointing our adversity to, and where we should not be pointing to. There's nothing that we cannot accomplish as a people, but that's a dangerous thing in a racist society who is built on people, whether political power or economic wealth, built on the inequity, disparity, and the subjugation of those people. That's a very dangerous thing for people to have that will and that self-determination.
Right. We're talking with Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson, and as we move to the final part of the interview here, I know if we go back to, and this all kind of ties in as well, if we go back to the events of this past summer, first, I know that there was a recent update about some of those events that took place in the aftermath of the George Floyd shooting.
Right.
Can you just kind of catch people up for those who maybe didn't see it or didn't hear about it, about the most recent update, and then we'll go from there.
Well, what happened on when the George Floyd death in the hands of the police, there was a series of social unrest all over the country, and Cleveland was one of the places that it occurred, and that was on May 30th of this year. And it was around, I guess, a couple of thousand people who came downtown to the Free Stamp, and the objective was to march from there to Public Square to hold a rally, make some speeches, and then march back to the Free Stamp next to City Hall and disperse. Well, I would say 3/4 of the people who showed up actually did that. But there was a significant number of people, 107, maybe 400 or 500 people who decided to focus in on the Justice Center, and they became very aggressive in terms of not just saying things, but trying how they were aggressive towards the police, towards the county sheriffs, and they began to throw things and all this other kind of stuff. So it was it wasn't about a peaceful protest at that time. It was very confrontational. And what was noticed, not only by the police, but some of the other people who demonstrated and left, was that part of that group was, it appeared to be that they were coordinating their activities. And as they were doing that, and there was a police presence and a county sheriff present around the Justice Center, a part of them peeled off and they went over to the business district of Euclid Avenue, and they just caused destruction. There was a riot, right. and because of that riot, there was destruction of property. And what happened was, since the police were tied up at the Justice Center, along with the National Guard and some of our suburban partners, they couldn't get over to Euclid Avenue to stop the destruction. And so they had pretty much had about an hour and a half of free hand over there, and they just tore up everything. But eventually, so it was a logistics problem. How do you move people from here to there in a crowd of people who, when you can't bring a police car, because if you do, then they'll tear up the police car and set it on fire, and you can't march police officers through that kind of a crowd for a half a mile, because they'll have to be fighting their way all the way through it, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happened was, they wound up getting this bus, and they began to transport people on the bus, and then they kind of escorted the bus through, and they were able to put a stop to the rioting in terms of the destruction of property and the looting. And I declared a curfew that began at 8:00. And once the curfew was in place, then that meant that you couldn't be downtown anymore. You just had to leave. And once we were able to do that, and were able to stabilize downtown, it became, we were able then to redeploy additional resources into the neighborhood, because by then we had recognized that those who were intending to cause destruction, they were going to go to places like West 25th or Detroit Throwaway or Shaker Square or Larchmere, other areas where you had these kind of commercial strips, right? So we were able to deploy, and as a result of that, for the next couple of weeks, we were able to prevent any other destruction in the city of Cleveland. So the question became, as a result of that, is how did the police behave? How did the police behave? They behaved in a way that I believe was appropriate based on what they had to confront. There were some people who said that they should not have used tear gas, or they should not have used pepper balls, or they should not have done this, or they should not have, or did the police overreact and abuse people. So what we do is, after these kind of events, we do an after-action report. The police department does it, and it takes its time, and it goes all the way through everything that happened, the timing of it. They look at all the video cameras. They look at the cameras that the police officer wear. They look at they listen to all of the radio traffic between the police and other people and all that stuff, and they put it into a sequencing of time, and then they evaluate what happened. What could they have done to prevent this? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? If they did something that was a transgression, that they were over aggressive or should not have done, they identified that, all those kind of things, and they put it into a report. And that report is what we released, I think it was yesterday, and we released that to the media and so that they could review it. And that's what that was. Now, and I apologize if I'm going too long. It's just I like to put things in context. So
right, absolutely.
What does that mean? So what does that mean? As you and others are reviewing the after-action report, there will be questions, and we'll answer those questions. But the real issue is, why did they have social unrest? What are the issues here around social unrest? Because I will tell you that because of the social unrest and the nature of that unrest, in Cleveland, fortunately, it was only for one night. Many other cities, it was for 4 nights, 5 nights, 2 weeks. Portland went on for I don't know how long, and Seattle had a long period of time. So but for Cleveland, it was only for one night. And as a result of this social unrest, not just in Cleveland, but across this country, you had people, corporate people, white people, CEOs of corporations, nonprofit CEOs of nonprofits, these huge nonprofits. You had sports teams. Everybody now wanted to say, well, what can we do to address this? Because now we recognize that there is inequities, disparities, and racism in our system. What can we do to address this? Well, the interesting thing is the farther away they get from the social unrest and the calmer things get, then that goes on their back burner. See? And they just start to continue to do things as usual, or they don't have the same sense of urgency. And so that is where we are now. But the social unrest occurred because of the inequity, disparities, and racism. Now, and I apologize again, but just want to put this in context to give you how people like to manipulate. You have those who are good intended. They are not minorities, not black, but they're good intended people who are standing up for justice, for equity, and anti-racism. They're standing up for it. And they're in their mind, they're saying these are the things that should be done. And so, but they have good intentions. They have real good intentions, but they miss the mark because they ain't us, right? Again,
Right.
that's someone telling you what's good for you. Then you have another group who use the situation, a legitimate situation, who recognizes inequity, disparities, and racism, but they use it to promote their agenda. And their agenda politically and ideology. And they try to draw us into that to be the base of that movement, so that, and they can use us as the soldiers for their ideologies and their agendas. So they try, to them, they manipulate that situation because they have an agenda. They have an ideology, and they're promoting that. And so those are the things that I go back and say that we have to not get caught up in someone else's agenda or ideology. We have to have our own. And because if we do not have our own, then what happened around people's consciousness and recognizing the sense of getting rid of racism and inequities and disparities, as things calm down, is not, they don't have the same sense of urgency. So if we don't keep that pressure on them, it ain't going nowhere.
Right. We're talking with Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson. And Dante, I know you have a question on this topic as well, sir.
Yes. So, Mr. Mayor, as a leader, you're really spread thin. So I really wanted to know how you balance kind of like the three main issues with this: being the mayor, the police are your employees, your constituency, you know, and their feelings towards the police, but then also you personally as a Black man. So I, you know, whatever happened in the situation, how do you balance your emotions with seeing the stuff that we see?
Well, that question goes to the core of decision making, because when you're in a position of making a decision or having to make a decision, and you're trying to make the right decision, everyone would not recognize it for what it is or understand what you're doing. And the people who you try to do the most for will, in many cases, because, again, not because of being unintelligent, but because they lack a certain knowledge of being ignorant, they are the fertile ground of manipulation. They will then be pulled into, what, Mayor, why didn't you take this stance? You should have said this, Mayor. Well, I could have said that, and I could have done that, but I know that in saying that and doing that, I'd have got a lot of amens, but I'd have got nothing done, which means I'd have been part of that group who is just deceiving the people. And I'm not going to do that, even if they don't understand what I'm doing. And if I'm wrong and I find out I'm wrong, I change my ways and I apologize for doing wrong. See, I don't think I'm right, because I did, you couldn't tell me nothing. But I do want to be right. And I want to be right in terms of my purpose of being here and who I'm here to serve. And I have to stay focused on that, even though it is not always understood, and even though the criticism I get may be coming from those who I'm attempting to help. And so I just won't say certain, like this defunding the police. That's a slogan, that's nice. But if you live in our neighborhoods and they shooting up your house and breaking in and killing your children and stuff, you want more police. Not only that, it is not practical. It's very impractical to defund the police. But the people who are saying that don't necessarily know what they're really saying, because they're talking a slogan. What the real essence of defunding the police means is to divert some of the money that is going towards police and put it into those social service kind of aspects on the prevention side, that will allow for people not to engage in crime and not to create an environment where they're either the victim of or the perpetrator of crime. That's what that really means, right? And so I understand what they're saying, but I can't just sign on to that because it ain't got no substance to it because it ain't set up that way.
Right.
So
Right.
my reality tells me I need more police. I just need the right policemen and need to be trained properly and held accountable. But at the same time, I recognize the legitimacy of what they're saying. So what do? I form a whole division with the commissioner of health, equity, and social justice. We work in declaring violence as a public health issue, racism as a public health issue. We then hire people to work with our children in rec centers dealing with trauma. We support the ex-felons coming out of the penitentiary, and after they've been vetted to make sure that they ain't got a bunch of game left in them, they get, because it's long. I don't mind people got the street in them, got good common sense. Street teach you good common sense. Is how you or you can be stupid out there too, but
Right.
you can learn good common sense, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so those who come out of penitentiary who want to do the right thing and a little job paying a little bit of money changes their life and gives them an option and things, we do that. I don't publicize all this stuff, you see. And so what I'm saying is that I fully recognize what the slogan's about, but when it comes time to implementation and execution and operationalizing it, the system is not designed to do that. And so, but I can politically jump over there, say the right thing, and get a good amen, but I won't get nothing done, and all I'm doing is deceiving the people. Or I can sit over here and just keep my mouth shut and go to work.
Right.
And get something done. Set up the infrastructure to promote it. So
Right.
that is how I have to balance it. Now, the emotional side, let me say, and I'm being completely honest with you, there are some people who, if they say something to me, then I will stop. And I will listen and pay attention because I value them and I value their opinion. But most people, they can say what they want to say. I don't have time to be a ping pong ball, being bounced back and forth, boom, bong, bong, bong. I don't have that kind of time, and I'd be loony as a tune.
Right.
So for me, there are people, however, if they say to me, Frank, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? And I say, they said, well, I understand what you're talking about, but did you know that? And I said, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know. Okay. And then if I know something, then I'll adjust what I'm doing. And if I've harmed someone in that process of doing something the old way, with good intent, I'll apologize.
Right.
I'll apologize. But so I take advice, but I am not going to be just at the whim of whatever the most recent fad is or the most recent slogan is and stuff like that. And emotionally, as long as I believe that I am doing the right thing and as long as I have the ability to adjust if I'm not doing it the right thing, then emotionally I'm okay. I just stay on my game. I just do what I got to do.
Absolutely. We're talking with Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson. Before we get out of here, the last time, I think it was the last time, or maybe the time before that you were on the show, it was in the middle, like in the heat of the George Floyd riots, and there was a conversation that we had that I thought was really profound. And just for listeners who may not have heard that episode or may have missed it, it was when we were talking about the after effects of the riots in the 60s, particularly how
Yes.
it impacted the Huff neighborhood and how it impacted the Black community in the city generally. Can you just touch a little bit about touch a little bit on that? Because I think that was a very, very powerful part of the conversation, especially because for thus obviously all three of us, none of us were around that time. Most of our listeners probably weren't either. So can you just touch on that a little bit again?
Yeah,
I think
and I hope in doing that I hit the point that you are suggesting. But let me just say, I'm 74. So, I've been around a little while. So I'm old enough to remember the tail end of segregation. And when we all, like in Central where I live, that it was 99.9% Black, but it had a culture. Because we were segregated, we had our own businesses, we had our own commercial strips, we had, own stores, barbershops, beautician shops, there were drugstores, there were hotels, there were movie theaters, nightclubs, all these kind of things that you see. And it was very vibrant because it was a heavy concentration of people, not just in public housing, but also apartment living that wasn't public housing and single family home ownership. And people worked at ALTV, or they worked at the post office, or they had jobs, and we were able to give a job because we had our own contractors. We had our own notaries, the doctors and the dentists, and all of them were in the community and everything, and they had their little offices on above the storefront and all that kind of stuff, or in a office building where they or apartment building where a hotel or something where they had a movie theater, all that kind of stuff. So you could see it was a vibrant community. And then the riots happened. First it was the Huff riots, and then you had Glenville. So I think during my time there was about 3 of them. Now I was here for the Huff riots. By the time the Glenville and the third one occurred, I was in Vietnam then. I get drafted in the Army. But when I came back home, all of a sudden, the commercial strip wasn't there anymore. It was a shell of itself. There was all these vacant houses and this vacant land that surrounded public housing. And it was a concentration of the poorest of the poor there. There were no more dentist office, no more lawyer office, no more doctor's office, no more notary office. You had a few restaurants left, a few, maybe a little clubs and stuff like that. You had a few of that left. So as a result of the riots, and as those riots occurred within the Black community, within our commercial strips, because some of those businesses were owned by Italians and Jews and Blacks, right? Mm-hmm. So now here it is, all of a sudden urban renewal comes, policy coming from the federal government, and then you got this thing around fair housing. And and that's what they call blockbusting, and these inner ring suburbs turned all Black because white people fled, and then they disinvested in the school system, and then the urban renewal, they tore down all these houses. They redlined where if you had a good business, an A1 credit, you couldn't get any money to expand your business or to create a better inventory or something like that, because they wouldn't loan you money because you was in this red line area. If you owned a home and you had a job and you had A1 credit, you couldn't get money to add an addition to your home or repair your home or nothing like that. So it was a complete disinvestment of the financing and the support of the economics and the economy of the Black community. And at the same time, they were doing that. We were gaining some political positions, but we were losing out in terms of representing us. But again, the riots occurred now here comes George Floyd in this situation. The difference between this situation is that they're not tearing up the Black community. They're tearing up downtowns. They've gone to wealth, and they're tearing that up. Now, the other difference is that you have a lot of non-black, which means a lot of young white kids who are involved in the violence. Whereas before it was during the 60s and it was predominantly black. So now you have with George Floyd, the violence is occurring in white commercial strips in downtown areas, and the makeup of the people who are doing the riot is distinctly different. Now, I don't know if that captures everything that I talked about before, if I made a point.
Absolutely.
If I didn't make it, remind me.
No, absolutely. No, that definitely captured.
So, but what does that tell you? So, see, but what does that tell you? See, what that tells you is that we have, that this situation has morphed into another situation of another agenda that is more, let's say, more dangerous to the system. Because just like in the civil rights movement, when many of the supporters of the civil rights were young white college kids, but they didn't engage in the violent side, not in cooperation with blacks. They may have done that on their own somewhere. But now what you have this wing of this movement of people who are so anti-system that their agenda is the destruction of the system and the imposing of a new system and ideology. And who they need is a foot soldier are black people. And they need the grievance and the injustice and the inequities and the disparities and the racism of black people, the legitimacy of that, in order to work their agenda. Now that's manipulation no different than a racist to me.
Right.
Because they don't care nothing either. What they're doing is that they're trying to take the legitimacy of a situation and work it to their advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mr. Mayor, I have to ask you, we can't end this interview without me asking you this. I would not be doing my job if I did not ask, have you made a decision on 2021? Are you running again? What is your decision on that?
I have not decided yet, and again, I'll tell you why. If, as you can see, whenever you're in a position of power, authority, or influence, people always, you become like a sinner. You know, you become people come to you for stuff, right? But also, there are people who want that. It's like being king of the hill, right?
Right.
And even though this hill is not as big as these national hills, it's still a little hill, right? It's not a mountain, it's a hill. And so, but anyway, some people want the hill. So if I said I was running, I'd have this great big target on me, and I had to deal with the bullshit associated with of running. Right. Which means that I'd be tied up in that, and I can't get nothing done. I'd be having to fight on 2-3 fronts trying to get something done. It'd be harder for me to get something done because everybody will be commenting, trying to undermine because they're doing politics because they want to be mayor or they want to support somebody for mayor. If I said I'm not running, won't nobody return my phone call. Right. I could call, I'd call somebody and they wouldn't even call me back because they said, why should I talk to you? The king is dead, long live the king, right? Right. And so they waiting on who the next person is and where they should be throwing their support, and they trying to get cozy with who they believe is the next person so that they can have influence and input there. So either way, I can't do my job. Right. I want to continue to do my job. I'm the mayor, and I will be the mayor. And when I decide strategically that is in my best interest, in the city of Cleveland's best interest, for me to announce one way or another, I'll do that. But until that time, then I'm going to have to stay on my game and get some things done, because once I declare, if I say I'm running, then all of a sudden I got to deal with the BS associated with that, and all my stuff gets bogged down. If I say I'm not running, I can't get nothing accomplished because people say I ain't got to deal with you no more.
Right, right. Well,
This is the way it is.
When you come to your decision, if you'd like to break that news on this show, we definitely wouldn't mind. Mr.
Well, I tell you, you talk to Valerie, and we'll have that discussion, okay?
Yes, sir. And as we leave, can you just leave a parting message to people about the pandemic and the things that they need to do to stay safe?
Well, can I just give the pandemic is simple to me. Is stay at home. Just stay at home. And stop this social gathering and stuff. Just stay at home. If you have to go out, wear a mask, keep your social distance, and wash your hands. That's very simple. The other thing I would say to people, particularly young people, not only in terms of the pandemic, in that you may not have the symptoms as severe as someone else and you recover quicker, but you're going to take that home to your parent and your grandparent, and they're subject to die. So you have to recognize that. But to young people, and to me, since I'm 74, there's a whole lot of young people out there to meet.
Right.
So I'm talking about from like everything under me, the teenagers, the 20s, and the 30s. The greatest fear that this country has, a country that was built where it was constitutionally had slaves that were considered 3/5 of a person and no more than chattel property, where you have institutionalized racism, institutionalized inequity, and institutionalized disparity that is born in the weight of the heavy weight of that burden is borne by us. And this country has become powerful, has become wealthy, and individuals have gained power, political power and other power and wealth based on perpetuating that inequity, disparity, and racism. Young people, the greatest danger to this country is that you will use all the bitterness, all the anger, all the frustration that you have that's built up in you because of having to bear this burden, and seeing what it's done to you, not only you, but your family, your friends, and who you care about. It's built up in you. All of that stuff is built up in you. It's pure power. And if you let it explode, you will destroy yourself and community. But if you harness that power and harness it in a way that you slowly release it, then there's no one that can stop you from doing what you want to do. Will it be easy? No, because the system's set up for it to be a hard road for you to hold. It's going to be difficult. And the closer you get to winning, the more difficult it's going to be. But you have been trained and you have been forged in this fire of this burden of inequity, disparity, and racism, which means you're like tempered steel, you're strong. And the greatest danger to this society is you in your right mind with the right focus and the release of that energy that I mentioned. And
Absolutely.
if you do that as a community, then you are in extreme danger to this system, but you will be able to accomplish great things and to do great things for the people, your people, our people. That's what I want to leave you with. Always remember that. Always remember that they're so strong and hard on you because they fear you the most. So
Absolutely.
don't get twisted on this thing.
Yes, sir. We absolutely appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye. See y'all later.
All right.
Bye-bye.